Meeting to order. In attendance this evening is Mr. Bobby Popowitz, representing the Port Royal District, Mr. Floyd Thomas, representing the Mattaponi District, Mr. Jeffrey Seeley, representing the Bowling Green District, Mr. Maxie Roselle represents the Reedy Church District, and I'm Wayne Akers, and I represent the Madison District. I'm going to call on Mr. Bobby Popowitz this evening to lead us in invocation, after which I would ask that you stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Popowitz.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for all the many blessings that have bestowed upon us during this holiday season, and help those who have less than us. Also during this holiday season, look after our troops abroad, make sure that they're safe, and come home to their families. In His name we pray, amen.
Amen. Amen. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Amendments to the agenda, Mr. Ashcraft?
Mr. Chairman, there are none this evening.
Opening board comments. Mr. Popowitz?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Thomas?
Mr. Chairman, I do have one. I just received a series of petitions from the residents of Lake Landor, and it's addressed to Comcast and Verizon. There are over 1,000 names attached here requesting high-speed internet through Comcast and Verizon, and I will make sure they get forwarded to those representatives.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Seeley?
No, sir.
Mr. Roselle?
None, Mr. Chairman.
And I have no comments either. Presentations and reports. Ms. Curry? Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Fine, thanks.
Thanks to Ms. Hall. Well, heads up, but I was trying to get paychecks printed for tomorrow since we're paying early. So,
okay. Employees appreciate that.
Trying. You all should have the report through the end of October. I didn't do the comparison like we did last month for the quarter. The revenue continues to come in as far as the taxes. The current half, it's a little on the, coming in. We expect most of it to get here by December 5th. We are still working on our delinquent collections. We've been trying to send out some notices to folks, trying to get as much of that collected as we can, sending them, trying to, before the holidays, and then we'll kind of take a little break and wait till the first of the year to try to work with some of those folks. But I think as far as the local taxes, they are coming in on the same rate as last year. Some of the state money looks like that's still holding up on the reimbursements at this point. Do you all have any specific questions on items?
Board have any questions of Ms. Kern on any issue on the Treasurer's report? Go ahead,
Ms. Kern, not necessarily directed towards the Treasurer's report, but since we have this opportunity, when are local real estate taxes due again?
The taxes are actually due on December 7th. For real estate and personal property, they're due on the 5th, but since that falls on a Saturday, then they will be due. It's been extended till the 7th.
Thank you. I just want to make sure for the folks that are listening.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Good point.
Okay. Thank you, Beth.
Okay.
Appreciate all you do. Mr. Roberts, it's always a pleasure to see you.
And you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I was talking to Percy after the fair, and he thought there'd be a good opportunity if we came down and sort of gave you some highlights from our first year so far at the Meadow for the fair event, the Celtic Festival, some information that we've gotten from customer surveys, but also give you an opportunity to hear about what we did in terms of public safety with fire and EMS and with policing, because I know those were issues that were discussed intensely when we were going through rezoning, so we thought we'd give you a report on how the first year went. Most of it is quite uneventful from that standpoint, and I think that's what you'll hear. We did have an attendance of almost 248,000. That is roughly our 5-year average. slightly up from last year. It would have been significantly higher had it not rained on our Percy Sledge concert on the first Friday night or Saturday afternoon and evening. That probably combined to cost us about 35,000 attendees. So our attendance probably would have been a lot closer to about 280,000 or over had it not impacted us. That's typically what does happen to us on a Saturday. It's difficult to make that up. You can rain on a weekday, but a Saturday's tough to make up. We do survey every year roughly 2,000 to 2,500 customers at the fair. These are about a 2-page survey questionnaire that we do intercepts. We do both entrance and exit interviews, and it gives us quite a bit of information that we thought we'd share with you. The percentage of attendees that we had that came from the Richmond area, and these are media markets. This is not zip codes yet. We're in the process of parsing out the zip codes, but I'm just talking in terms of media markets. Our percentage from Richmond declined to 68%, while our percentage from Fredericksburg North doubled from just slightly over 6% to almost 14%. So the shift north did do exactly what we thought it would do, which is attract more visitation from the Fredericksburg North area, and we're very pleased with that. We're very pleased with that number. That's ahead of what we had forecasted back when we consulted the move in terms of the percentage movement in our attendance. Another thing that was interesting, our number of first-time attendees did go up slightly. About 15% of the people who attended the fair this year, it's the first time they attended. More interesting is we had a significant increase in those who had not visited in the last 10 years. Again, about 70 to 75% of our attendees in a typical year have attended at least once in the last 5 years. Well, our percentage increase for those who had not visited in 10 years or more went from 6% to almost 12%, which is a very significant jump. So we had a lot of people come back home who hadn't been to the fair in a long, long time. There are a variety of reasons for that. New location being part of it, a more rural setting being part of it, ease of access being part of it. But again, you can probably find 100 different answers to the question as to why that occurred. And that held true across all the visitation years. So it wasn't quite that dramatic, but we did have a lot more customers who hadn't been there in a while who attended. We did have an increase in attendees as a percentage of those over age 45 and a decrease of those who are 12 to 17. That is not unusual, tends to be a national trend. The impact of that is the percentage of riders, or people who rode, went down. We typically averaged about 45, 40%, 46% of attendees riding a ride, and that dropped to about 38%. And that, again, is a national trend in ridership. It also reflects a slightly different demographic of who our attendees are. In terms of rating, 0 being unacceptable and 10% or 10, a rating of 10 being excellent, on the entrance, our average was 7.9%, which is a fairly acceptable number. It is down slightly. We typically average about 8.5, 8.8 on those coming in. The reason that dropped was probably due to traffic and parking. And we've got some work to do there, and we know that. We've already started work with the state police and VDOT on how to probably reroute how we, in fact, load our parking lots, and we're going to be interviewing national firms who handle parking for major events for next year, and we think there's some things that we can improve there. It does not require a physical change. It just requires us being a little bit smarter about how we unload and load our parking lots. And a couple of other just highlights here. Overall fair environment, which is a pretty important thing for us, which takes in everything from cleanliness to restrooms to accessibility to overall safety and security. That number was up to 8.68 as an average score, which is very high. We typically have averaged right around an 8, so somewhat of an increase there. The next one we're particularly proud of. 88% of fairgoers, we either exceeded or met their expectations. Now, that's fairly consistent, but what we found interesting is we jumped in terms of those we exceeded. We had been having about 27% rate us as exceeding their expectations. That number this year jumped to 47%. So if anybody in the retail market will tell you if you move that big a number to exceeding expectations, that's a lot of very good ambassadors and a great place to grow from in coming years. Household income and education level went up. That's probably, again, due to a shift in the age demographic of attendees. Good value for the money went up to now almost an average score of well, an 83 rating. 83% of fairgoers said it was a good value for the money. We're very pleased with that. That is an increase. And that's in spite of the fact that we raised ride prices, and we also started charging for parking first time. So that was a really good result for us. The other thing that's also important is the number of people that recognize that we're a not-for-profit went up to almost 40%. That was less than 20% 5 years ago, knew that. So we're very pleased with that as well. We also surveyed almost 1,100 attendees as to what other types of events that they would like to see at the Meadow Event Park. And that gave us some fairly interesting data, but it also helps us narrow what we go out and try to sell the property for. This is a great marketing tool when we're meeting with promoters. Number one thing was music festivals, with country and gospel being the two things most often listed as something they'd like to see at the park. Home shows, food and wine events, dog shows, craft shows, Christmas collectors, and antique car shows, all of which we're working very hard and have some already booked in the coming year. In terms of future bookings at this point, between now and the end of 2010, we have 15 events contracted in the Farm Bureau Center. That does not count one that we've already had. And we also have prospects that we're working another dozen or so. So we're fairly confident that over the next 12 to 14 months, we'll have 27 events in the Farm Bureau Center, given what we are working at a minimum. Americraft Pavilion, we've already contracted 12 events, and we have another 10 prospects for that facility. And we've already had 4 events in that facility, and they've all been very successful. Various things around the property, in our Thrill Pit, Festival Loop, the Ducks Unlimited pavilions down in the Heritage Village area, the parking lots. We've got about 10 events contracted, another 14 to 15 that we're working for those areas. The most interesting is the Rotary Wife Carrying Race next June in our Thrill Pit, where we had, I'm not sure what that is. I didn't know you guys had Norwegians here in Caroline County, but apparently you do. Union Bank and Trust Hall, the mansion, is, yes, I said wife carrying. That's exactly what I said. It's a fundraiser. Anyway, Union Bank and Trust Hall, and with Kevin Whiteman's help, we should be completed renovation there late June of 2010. We've already booked 2 weddings, and we have 25 that we're talking to that I would expect now that we have a completion date. That's going to pick up pretty dramatically on that facility. And in our equine complex between now and next summer, we've got 7 events booked, and we're working another 19 at this point. If we had a covered ring, we probably would add about another 20 events to that, and that is sort of phase 1A for us, is trying to figure out how to cover one of our equine rings. In terms of the Celtic Festival, attendance was down slightly. Again, we had a half a day of rain on Saturday. We had a great Sunday. And beautiful weather. I do recall in the rezoning, you guys assured me it wouldn't rain on any of our major events in this county, so I need to talk to you guys about your marketing going forward, but I'll take that up with Gary Wilson at the next opportunity. I'm sorry?
Blame Gary Wilson.
Yeah, I will. I'll take that up with Gary. I'd be happy to answer any questions of the stuff I've covered, or we can go ahead with the next 2 presentations, and then we can come back up whichever way you'd like to proceed.
Board have any questions of Mr. Roberts?
I don't have any questions. I do have a statement. Mr. Roberts, you put on a heck of a show. And
thank you.
We're very proud to have you here. At least I am, and I'm looking forward to next year's event as well.
Well, I'll convey that back, and I do appreciate it. We have about 26 very dedicated staff people that spend a good part of a year planning these events and also renting it out to other events. And the fair takes literally hundreds of volunteers, probably 300 to 400 that help us put that on, and I'll convey that, and I appreciate it.
Mr. Roberts, I want you to know the best thing I found with the fair this year was the fact that it provided roughly $100,000 of revenue to the county. So that was the best thing I saw at the fair this year. No, I'm only kidding. It was a tremendous event, but that was certainly icing on the cake that we had that.
Well, given what's going on with our endowment, could I apply to get some of that back?
I doubt that.
Okay, well, on that point, that I think I went back and checked our notes and some of the press clippings. That is about what we estimated that the county share would be when we went through the rezoning. If I recall, the good news is it could have been much higher had we achieved the attendance. The one thing I kind of liked about that number that you got, our vendors aren't always telling us the truth. Surprisingly, we've got some vendors that have been coming to the fair for 25 or 30 years, and they've never made any money. I don't know how they stay in business, but they've never made any money. So, but they keep coming back, and that tells me they did well, which is good.
Absolutely. Mr. Thomas?
Kerry, I just want to say you did a great job. I'm extremely impressed by your marketing. And if you'd like to sell the naming rights to this building, we'll, look at that. And the other thing is that we told you before, and I distinctly remember telling you this before, it's always hot as could be for the county fair, and it always rains for the state fair. You knew that.
That's not what Gary told me, but that's okay.
All right.
That's
But thanks, you did a great job.
But thank you.
Mr. Seeley?
The comments that I had from everybody that I work with that went, and I was amazed at the number of people that did, were all completely complimentary of the entire event and everything there. So I too will say congratulations and am very proud to have the state fair here. One question that I was asked by one of the school board members, is it possible to have graduation in a covered facility down there next year?
Representatives of the school system, the high school, and the school board came down and met with our facility rental folks about 3 weeks ago. And as I understand it, they are in the contract negotiations to try to make that happen and make the facility available to do that. It could be accommodated at the Farm Bureau Center.
Because the one problem we have is it always rains or threatens to rain graduation night.
Yes.
And the thunder and lightning drives everybody inside, to which there is no good solution, as we all know, sitting there. So it would be a tremendous benefit to the county and to the school system to be able to know where it's going to be inside, and everybody can be accommodated that wants to come. I think that would be a tremendous asset.
Well, again, given what your average attendance has been at the ball field, it could be accommodated in the Farm Bureau Center pretty comfortably.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Roselle?
Carrie, again, thank you for all that you guys have done. And again, we appreciate that you guys have done everything that you said you would do. And I can't tell you how much and how invaluable that is, because it means a lot to us. And in the beginning, we did have a lot of, back and forth about how we were going to do some things with fire and rescue and police. But I think at the end of the day, we all did pretty well. And we thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you. I'd like to call up first Stephen Bryan. He is our Director of HR and Risk Management, and he'll give you a quick report on fire and EMS.
Okay.
And how we handled that. We did use a private firm to provide that service to us. And he'll be followed by Lieutenant Kerry Stiles, who you all have met before, with the Virginia State Police, and he has been and is our chief liaison for what we do on site for the fair and the Celtic Festival. If you have any other questions for us when they're finished, we'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Good evening. As Corey said, from a lot of different perspectives, it was relatively fun but uneventful fair. From the perspective of fire and first aid and EMS, as you're probably aware, as we had said we were going to do previously, we contracted with ETS Training Systems Incorporated to provide fire and emergency services for us during the 11 days of the fair. We had them on site all of the time that the fair was open and their services available. From a fire perspective, we had 3 alarms. 2 were very small, insignificant fires that were responded to and extinguished very, very quickly. And the 3rd one was a false alarm, and that's the only thing from a fire perspective, other than the fire safety inspections of all facilities that needed to be inspected during the fair itself. They were all inspected twice and found to be in compliance with everything they needed to be in compliance with. From a first aid perspective, we stayed quite busy. We were able to establish 2 first aid facilities on the site, one on the north side of the road, one on the south side of the road. The one on the north side of the road, being adjacent to the Midway, stayed the busiest, and in that facility, which was a STIP tent. A STIP tent is a stabilization and treat in place. It's kind of like a mobile MASH like the military would have used, like you may have seen on TV years ago. A fully operational first aid facility with running water, heat, air, and everything else. We saw 328 patients in that first aid facility during the fair. We had 119 contacts with people out around the park itself, and some of those were obviously treated and released right there on the spot. Might have been a simple trip and fall Band-Aid or something like that, or carried back to the first aid facility. But we did treat 328 patients in there during the course. We had, from an EMS perspective, we had 19 total transports. 17 were transported by ETS training systems with their ambulance services, both their ALS units that were on site during the fair, and 2 were transported by Frog Level. And that's just about everything that occurred from a fire, first aid, and EMS perspective. So I'd be glad to answer any questions you have.
Questions?
Were those numbers higher or lower than normal? About the same?
Relating to attendance, they were just about the same. I think our high year on first aid visits was about 435 in 2007 when our attendance hit a spike that year. So very comparable to everything we've done in the past, both in fire and first aid and EMS calls.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
Good evening.
Good to see you.
We want to thank you for the opportunity to be on the agenda tonight. I'm going to be very brief, and then I'm going to turn it over to Lieutenant Stiles to give you some more detailed information. But I wanted to do a couple things. I wanted to thank some people tonight. First, the State Fair Public Safety Committee, which does include Sheriff Lippa. This group met for over 3 years in planning the police response and safety and security of this event, and they did a wonderful job. And I think their efforts directly contributed to the success we had this year at the State Fair. Secondly, I want to thank the men and women of the Virginia State Police. We had a lot of folks at the fair, as you may have seen, a lot of long hours, a lot of time on their feet, and they did a wonderful job. We're very proud of them, and we received a lot of good comments from the public. Thirdly, I'd like to thank the administration of the State Fair of Virginia for their support. Right from the get-go, they made it very clear that public safety at the State Fair of Virginia was a primary concern for them, a high priority. And they've worked very closely and supported us every step of the way. So Curry and his folks deserve a lot of applause for that as well. The last thing I'd like to say before Kerry comes up is that we have a satellite office at the State Fair site. And our troopers use that satellite office year-round, day and night, so we do have a presence there even when we don't have any official events going on. So we're glad for that, and that gives us a way to go in and out and keep an eye on the place kind of after hours. So with that, Gary.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The mission of the Department of State Police was to provide the most effective and efficient on-site security and traffic control for the 2009 State Fair of Virginia at the Meadow Event Park. The State Police was the primary law enforcement agency responsible for the investigation of all criminal and traffic incidents occurring at the Meadow Event Park, also at the Kings Dominion Campground in Hanover County, and all along Route 30 from US Route 1 all the way to Route 301. We had traffic control duties on the public highways, security and police services inside the Meadow Event Park, where we deployed uniformed and plainclothes police officers. We had closed circuit television surveillance in act. We had bomb detection canines that were on the grounds. The State Police med-flight helicopter that was on scene, using the command post and the mobile command post during the event. In addition, we had some specialty vehicles, golf cart type vehicles, to get around the facility. As Mr. Roberts stated, the attendance was almost 248,000 people, which was an increase from 2008. Some of the actions that were taken, we issued 41 summonses during the 11 days. Those summonses included traffic actions that took place out on Route 30 and Meadow Farm Road, as well as some incidents that took place in the parking lot, but the majority of them were out on the public highway. We made 7 arrests. Of those arrests, 5 of the arrests was of one individual, which was a vendor that was on site that was selling counterfeit goods. We had an agent that identified those goods. We made an arrest, and during that arrest, we also discovered that he was in possession of methamphetamine, cocaine, and marijuana, and he was manufacturing the counterfeit goods on site. He was arrested and removed, and his tent was in then closed up and removed from the facility. We had one arrest of a subject that had a concealed weapon that he was not supposed to have on the property. And then we also had a DUI arrest that took place at Route 30 and Meadow Farm Road as a result of a hit and run as well. So it was really a non-event as far as the inside security. We had troopers that took a lot of pride in what they were doing. We had supervisors that were making sure that the troopers were doing what they should do. And as we forecasted, the State Fair of Virginia up at the Meadow Event Park was a very pleasant event for the attendees. We did have some traffic issues, as Mr. Roberts has relayed to you. We've already started the planning phase, and I look forward to the opportunity of having the same cars come next year, because I think we can handle them and do the right thing and get them in there much quicker and much more efficiently.
Thank you. Questions? Comments?
A quick one, and I couldn't see, was it Lieutenant?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. The traffic numbers, I guess we can't really compare what was to there, but is it close to comparable?
Well, it's different.
Yeah, that's...
The study that was done, I think it was 3 years ago, forecasting where the traffic was coming from was very accurate. We anticipated, we anticipated, 90% of the traffic to come from Interstate 95, and it in fact did. I guess one of the concerns was the education to the public not knowing how to leave on Route 301, so they had to go back to 95 as well. I think that next year that some people have learned from that, and that next year that the traffic, we'll get some more traffic on the 301 side, and we're prepared to address that as well. We have the numbers. VDOT had equipment out to tell us how many cars came, when they came, where they came from, and by using that data will help us in managing the traffic for next year.
Okay.
But we had no way to really know when the rush was. We didn't know how long people would stay at the fair. We knew what the turnover was from the Henrico event, but we didn't know if it was going to be the same, and in fact it was not the same. People came earlier, they stayed for a longer time period, but then they also left earlier. So, we see that as how to manage the traffic differently as well.
And it's going to take a few years before you get a real model to see what happens, I'm sure.
Correct. We can't really say that the first year will give us a trend.
Right.
But we do have a starting point and know how to respond to what we had in 2009 to be prepared to address it for 2010.
Okay. And the last question, you mentioned there was one concealed weapons violation,
Yes, sir.
and I know Virginia's a open carry state. Do we actually, or can we, prohibit firearms in that particular area?
Yes, sir. That's private property, and if the State Fair of Virginia says there are no weapons allowed, there's no weapons allowed.
Okay, because that may be something, I don't know if you want to consider that, Curry, but that many people and automatic pistols or whatever is probably a recipe for disaster. Right. And I mean, it's your property, so you can say that.
It was prohibited.
Oh, all right.
No, it is prohibited.
Okay.
It's listed on our website, it's in our fair brochure, it's in our daily guide. We've been doing metal detection to prevent it for the last, 5 years, 6
Yes,
years?
sir.
We started in 2004.
Okay.
That was a recommendation out of the safety committee. A firearm is not the only definition of a weapon.
Right.
But we are private property. The only people that are allowed to have a concealed weapon would be off-duty state troopers, and they have to go in and register, plus a handful of private security people that we engage. Otherwise, it doesn't matter if you have a permit or not. It's private property, it's not allowed.
Okay.
And frankly, with the amount of policing that we have at the fair, if you really think you need to have a weapon, with the number of state troopers that we had, then you really ought to stay home if you think that's unsafe. So
Okay.
that's the approach that we've taken.
Thank you, sir.
I just want to follow up that the number of the state police presence at that facility was really impressive and along Route 30. And I got to say that most of the people did notice the presence down Route 30 to 301 and greatly appreciated. They at least knew they were getting close when they started seeing all the state police cars. So that did have the high visibility, I think, did help set the tone for the event. And I think that may also contribute to the low incidence inside the facility. And I'd like to applaud the state police for that presence.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, just real quick, like I said, the only concern I had from really anyone about the whole event was the traffic and the hour delay out there, but I appreciate and understand what you guys had to do to try to work through that.
Yes.
And if anybody tries to say that there were too many troopers, look at the results. And I think the results will speak for themselves, because I think, I heard that once or twice. And I tried my best to explain to people that, you know, that's exactly what we needed. And we thank you guys for all that you did and working with our safety committee, and proved that to work well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you a lot. You know, we've heard about the troopers outside, but as I was walking around the grounds, I heard several senior citizens like myself make the comment that it did not appear to be as many state troopers out in the park itself, on the foul grounds. And I guess it's because the fact that you were there, but people just didn't feel threatened or didn't feel the need to point out a state policeman. But I heard several people say that it did not appear to be as many policemen on the foul ground itself as in past years. But you were there, I know, and I saw you as I was walking around many places. But that's a good thing. I mean, people felt comfortable in walking around and not threatened. So that's a good thing, and I appreciate it. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for what, Kerry, I want to thank you for the promises that you made and the promises that you kept. That's always important for us all. I've said to many people that if I could get a company such as the State Fair to come in and produce $100,000 of revenue in an 11-day period, hey, I'd love to see lots and lots and lots of those in Caroline County, because it's you're in and you're out and you leave money, so that's a good thing. But again, we do appreciate you for what you do and the efforts that you made toward making this a successful event and making Caroline a better place. I mean, there's no question. We are known throughout the state of Virginia and beyond because of the State Fair, and we appreciate this a great deal. Thank you, men. Appreciate all of you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
before you leave that issue, there'll be a full debriefing of State Fair and
Right.
Celtic Festival with staff on December the 10th. We invited all the stakeholders. If you recall, we had a series of meetings all of 2009 leading up to the fair, and I think those were very successful in getting them to where the final result. So we will be having our debriefing of that, and hopefully everybody will have an opportunity to provide input to strengthen the effort for next year.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, and we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Update from Chief Lehman.
Good evening,
Hello.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Tonight, we're just going to give you a quick brief on the H1N1 influenza and the update of what's going on in the county. With me tonight, I have Lieutenant Aaron Southworth. Aaron's the infection control officer for the Department of Fire and Rescue and the technical expert. And she's actually been staying on top of this and putting a lot of time and effort into this and making sure that that we're dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. The 2009 H1N1 influenza started in April 2009 and was referred to early on as the swine flu. This illness originated in Mexico and quickly became an international pandemic. Within weeks, the World Health Organization was at a pandemic phase 5. In May 2009, there was a national concern, and most states had already started seeing cases. By June 2009, the pandemic was elevated to a phase 6. The Rappahannock Health District began taking actions early in the spring. Emergency managers, representatives from emergency service organizations, local hospitals, and the Rappahannock Emergency Medical Council began to meet with local health officials to prepare for a possibility of a pandemic event. This was a proactive approach to prepare for an event, even though at the time there were no documented H1N1 cases within the Rappahannock Health District. By the beginning of the summer, the pandemic flu plans throughout the region were being revised and vaccination options were being discussed. Representatives from the Caroline County Fire Rescue and Emergency Management were active participants in all the planning process. The Rappahannock Area Health District had plans for vaccinations of all emergency responders as well as school children. Somewhere during production of the vaccine, problems began to occur which resulted in the delay of the vaccines reaching the intended agencies. It became apparent early on that there was going to be difficulties in obtaining the vaccine. Immediately, staff began working other options to find sources of the vaccine. 20 doses were actually obtained from Stafford County, and they were given to our high-risk fire EMS providers to include both volunteer and the career staff. Lieutenant Southworth continues to maintain constant contact with representatives of each of the volunteer agencies, as well as the Caroline County Sheriff's Office, to identify high-risk providers. She also maintains a list of total number of providers that wanted to take the vaccine as it becomes available. To date, we have notified Caroline County emergency responders of 8 vaccine clinics, as well as making sure that they understand the process for reimbursement if they obtain the vaccine elsewhere. The majority of the countywide responders that have requested vaccine have either received the nasal mist or the injection. The department has also been in constant communication with the school system about the vaccine clinics that they are coordinating. The department has committed 1 ALS provider and a response vehicle to stand by for their clinics in case of a medical emergency. The school system has offered 2 vaccine clinics to date, reaching approximately 1,050 students and staff. The department is also trying to coordinate seasonal flu vaccine, which originally was offered before the H1N1 vaccine, but supplies have decreased, and we're waiting for the arrival of more shipments to the facilities. Nationally, up to this point, almost all the influenza cases that we've seen so far have been H1N1. All of the documented cases in Virginia have been H1N1 and not the seasonal flu. The data and statistics on influenza cases are not completely accurate. They're estimations because many people with the influenza-like illness do not seek treatment or are not tested when they do seek treatment. The total estimated cases nationally are anywhere between 14 and 34 million. Estimated hospitalizations nationally is 60,000 to 153,000. And estimated deaths, 2,500 to 6,100. In Virginia, the Rappahannock Health District, the percentage of emergency department and current care center visits displaying influenza-like illnesses are seeing about a 5 to 10% caseload. And this average appears to be the trend across the state right now. As of today, the number of confirmed H1N1 deaths reported to the Virginia Department of Health is 29. None of those have been within the Rappahannock Health District. Speaking with the Caroline County Health Department today, they are anticipating receiving a supply of both H1N1 and seasonal flu within the next couple of weeks. In addition to their Wednesday vaccination clinics, they are planning to schedule several evening clinics to meet the needs of the community. And I'll answer any questions, or Aaron, depending on what they are.
Board members have questions of Chief Lehman or Aaron, either one. Thank you. We appreciate that presentation because I think it's important for the people of Caroline to know that it is something that you and Fire and Rescue take serious and stay on top of it. And Aaron, appreciate your efforts as well, but that you're staying on top of it. I think it's important that we let the people of Caroline know that it is something that you are constantly looking at.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Appreciate it. Does anyone have under appointments, Board of Assessors, does anyone have their person for the Board of Assessors? All right, we'd like to maybe have that at the next meeting if we could, not the next meeting, because the next meeting is next week, but the first meeting in January, we probably need to have those appointments ready.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
can we ask staff to give us the appointees from last
Sure.
census?
Sure.
Because I do recall when we were talking about doing this last year that people said they had a great board last time and they wanted to be on it again or things of that nature, so I think that might help.
Sounds great.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Consent agenda. Is there any item on the consent agenda that a board member wishes to pull?
Let's see, I would like to pull item D.
Item E?
D is in Delta.
Oh, D, okay. That it?
Is that,
All right, is there a motion to approve on the consent agenda A, B, C, E, and F?
So moved.
Second.
Second, motion made by Mr. Thomas, seconded by Mr. Popowitz. Discussion on the motion. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion is carried. All right, D.
Mr. Chairman, we just have one board member who is looking at abstaining, so I wanted to pull it primarily for that
All right.
purpose.
All right,
So I move that we approve item D.
okay. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Rozell, seconded by Mr. Seeley, that we approve D on the consent agenda. Discussion? All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
I will abstain.
There's 4 ayes and 1 abstention. Mr. Popowitz abstained. Is there a motion for the board to go into closed meeting to section 2.2-3711A7, consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff?
And
So,
Mr. Chairman, to be specific, it is regarding Coominson Creek Regional Jail.
All right,
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we move into closed session to discuss in legal consultation and briefs by staff on Coominson Creek.
is there a second?
Second.
Motion's made by Mr. Rozell, seconded by Mr. Seeley, and you heard the motion. Discussion? All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion is carried. The board will enter closed meeting.
And we'll return shortly, close to 7:30?
Aye.
We'll return close to 7:30, or take a recess after that? Or
Yeah,
whatever?
well, as soon as we'll finish up closed session.